The Mothman, terror in 1966. Come in close, because this one operates on a different frequency from the others. The others have bodies, or absences where bodies should be, or letters signed by strangers, or ships that vanished without a signal. This one has a creature seen by dozens of people across 13 months in a small West Virginia town. Seen clearly, described consistently, reported with the specific matter-of-fact quality of people who are not given to invention and who are, in many cases, reporting something they would strongly prefer not to have seen. And then the bridge fell. And after the bridge fell, the sightings stopped. Whether those two facts are connected is the question that Point Pleasant, West Virginia has been asking since December 15, 1967, and has never answered to its own satisfaction. Part 1. The Town. Point Pleasant sits at the confluence of the Ohio and Kanawha rivers in Mason County, West Virginia, a small working town of approximately 5,000 people in the mid-1960s, the kind of place whose economy was organized around the river traffic and the industrial concerns that the rivers made possible, whose social life was organized around its churches and its schools, and whose relationship to the wider world was that of a community that went about its business without expecting to be particularly noticed by anyone beyond its immediate geography. In 1966, Point Pleasant had one additional geographical feature that would later become significant in the context of what happened there. Between the town and Gallipolis, Ohio, across the Ohio River, stood the Silver Bridge, a suspension bridge built in 1928 using an innovative I-bar chain design that was, at the time of its construction, a point of local pride and engineering distinction. By 1966, it was aging but functional, carrying Route 35 traffic across the river with the unexamined reliability of infrastructure that has worked for long enough that people have stopped thinking about it working. The town did not know, in November 1966, that it had 13 months. Part 2. The sightings begin. The first widely reported sighting occurred on November 15, 1966, when two young couples, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallet, were driving near an area outside Point Pleasant known locally as the TNT area, a decommissioned Second World War munitions facility consisting of abandoned concrete igloos and overgrown industrial infrastructure set in a wooded area north of town. The area was a known local destination for teenagers driving at night, remote enough for privacy, eerie enough for the specific kind of excitement that eerie places offer to young people who have not yet had reason to take eeriness seriously. What the four reported seeing, when they described it to Deputy Millard Halstead at the Mason County Sheriff's Department in the early hours of November 16th, was a creature. It was large. They estimated 7 feet tall, man-like in its general proportions, but not a man. It was gray. It had wings, large, folded against its back when standing, with a wingspan they estimated at 10 to 15 feet. And it had eyes. Red eyes, they said. Reflective red eyes, located not where a face would have eyes, but higher, near the top of what would have been the head. The creature had been standing near the road. When their headlights found it, it had not fled. It had spread its wings. It had followed their car, running, they said, not flying, at speeds they estimated at over 100 miles per hour as they drove back toward Point Pleasant. Deputy Halstead took the report seriously. He knew the four witnesses. They were not, in his professional assessment, the kind of people who fabricated things. The next day, the story ran in the local paper, under a headline that used a name borrowed from the television series then airing, Batman, and modified it slightly. The name stuck. The Mothman. Part 3. The Witnesses. What made the Mothman sightings of 1966 and 1967 different from the general class of unusual creature reports was not any single account, but the accumulation of them and the specific quality of the people providing them. In the 13 months between November 1966 and December 1967, more than 100 individual witnesses reported encounters with the creature or with phenomena associated with its presence. They were not, as a class, unusual people. They were factory workers, farmers, housewives, a contractor, a retired military officer. They reported their experiences with the specific reluctance of people who would genuinely prefer not to be associated with the story. Several asked local journalists not to publish their names, not because they doubted what they had seen, but because they understood what having seen it implied about how they would be perceived. Their descriptions were consistent across accounts that were, in many cases, obtained independently, before witnesses had had the opportunity to compare notes or to read each other's accounts in the newspaper. The height, the gray or dark coloring, the wingspan, and always, consistently, across account after account from people who had never met each other, the red eyes. Some witnesses reported additional effects in the creature's vicinity. Animals behaved unusually. Television reception in Point Pleasant deteriorated significantly during the period of the sightings. Dogs barked at nothing. Some witnesses reported the sense of being watched in their homes in the days after their encounters, a persistent, directionless surveillance that they could not locate or explain. The investigator who took the most thorough interest in the Point Pleasant events was John Keel, a journalist and researcher who arrived in the town in 1966 and spent significant time there over the following year, interviewing witnesses, documenting the accounts, and developing a theoretical framework that he would eventually publish in a 1975 book. Keel was not a credulous man. He was a careful one. His documentation of the Point Pleasant events remains the most thorough primary record of what was reported there. He could not explain it. He said so directly. Part 4. The Men in Black. Among the phenomena that accompanied the Mothman sightings, and that Keel documented with particular thoroughness, were visits to witnesses by individuals who did not behave like ordinary people. The Men in Black, as they came to be called in Keel's account and in the subsequent literature, were figures who appeared at witnesses' homes in the days after their Mothman encounters, identified themselves as officials of various government agencies, sometimes clearly, sometimes vaguely, and asked detailed questions about what had been seen. They drove large, dark American cars that witnesses sometimes described as looking too clean and too new, as though they had been produced specifically for this purpose and had no prior use. They wore dark suits. They wore hats that were slightly wrong for the period, a style not quite contemporary, not quite historical. Their behavior was the most consistently described element of these visits. They spoke in a way that witnesses found difficult to characterize but consistently found disturbing, too formal, slightly too precise, with a quality of rehearsed language rather than spontaneous conversation. One witness reported that her visitor ate Jell-O with a spoon very slowly and deliberately, as though learning the process in real time. Whether these visitors were government agents conducting genuine surveillance of unusual phenomena reports, or something else, something that the category of government agent does not quite contain, is a question that Keel addressed at length and declined to resolve definitively. He noted that their questions were very specific, and that after their visits, the witnesses to whom they had spoken were, as a general pattern, more frightened than before. Part 5. The Bridge. At approximately 5:04 in the afternoon of December 15th, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed. It collapsed during rush hour, when the bridge was at near-capacity traffic. 46 vehicles on the structure at the moment the first I-bar link in the suspension chain failed. The failure was sudden and complete. The bridge fell into the Ohio River in less than a minute. 46 people died. 2 bodies were never recovered. The subsequent engineering investigation determined that the failure had originated in a single corroded I-bar link, a flaw that had been developing undetected for years, invisible to the inspection protocols of the era, awaiting the specific combination of load and temperature and time that December 15th, 1967 provided. The engineering explanation is thorough, documented, and credible. It does not explain the Mothman, but the Mothman, whatever it was, whatever category of thing the witnesses of Point Pleasant were encountering in the 13 months before December 15th, 1967, stopped being reported after the bridge fell. Not gradually, not fading over weeks. It stopped. John Keel, who had spent more time with the Point Pleasant events than any other investigator, proposed a theory that he acknowledged was impossible to verify, that the creature and the associated phenomena were in some way connected to the bridge, that what the witnesses had been seeing was not a monster in the conventional sense, but something that existed at the intersection of disaster and perception, something that arrived in proximity to catastrophic events and was witnessed in the period before they occurred. He could not prove this. He said so himself. What he could demonstrate was the timeline. A creature seen consistently for 13 months by more than 100 people in a small West Virginia town. A bridge that fell on a specific December afternoon. And then, after the bridge fell and 46 people went into the river with it, the silence that followed. Point Pleasant built a statue of the Mothman. It stands in the center of town, a metallic sculpture, wings spread, red eyes rendered in the material. Tourists visit it. There is a Mothman museum. There is a Mothman festival. The town has, in the way of places that have been marked by something, made its peace with what it was marked by. Whether what watched Point Pleasant for 13 months was a creature, or a warning, or something that the available categories of explanation simply do not contain, is a question the Ohio River has been moving past since December 15th, 1967. Without stopping, without answering, without any apparent awareness that anyone is still asking. And that's where we'll leave things tonight, with the bridge, the river, and the question that outlived them both. Until next time, sleep well, my friend.